That will never work. You can't push that. Seriously? Don't. Oh my God, that's everything. That's bad. You probably should find other hobbies. You ever learn how to stop? Stop. Be happy. Well, you don't. Don't bother me. I've seen better. Do you really want to stop? And my third grade, give it up. Welcome to Horrible Writing, the rawest, most candid, in-your-face writing show on the interwebs because none of us have time to suck. Let's do this. All right, welcome to episode 20 of Horrible Writing. This is Paul Sadine. I am your host, and you all have spoken quite loudly. You kind of dig this interview series that I'm doing and the folks I'm interviewing, and I'm digging it as well. So this is really cool. The good news for you, I've got another interview for you today. This time, I'm going to talk to a guy who, he's on the social medias. You might not see him because he's kind of a quieter person, but you probably have come across his audio dramas because he's got a slew of them. We're going to talk about some of the stuff that he's doing with those. He's a writer, a producer. He's a producer of audio drama. He's a very creative person, and he's got one of the things I admire about him is he's got a broad range of stuff that he can do. You'll know about more what I'm talking about here as we get going, but I'm talking about none other than Rick Coste of modern audio drama, but that may not ring a bell for you, so let me name some of the stuff that he does. He's done Scotch, The Behemoth, Charlie's Mailbox, Fiona Potts interviews, Inhale, which I really dug. I just finished recently. And then he's got, as is typical with Rick, he's got a lot of stuff coming out. So, Rick, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you very much, Paul. It's great to be here, actually.
Well, it's awesome to get this chance to talk to you. You know this because I've told you this in private. My audience will know this as I make this admission, but there's a lot about you that I try to replicate myself.
Oh, well.
So to have a chance to get this opportunity to talk to you, I'm really excited.
Oh, well, thanks, man.
All right. And I promise I'll be very kind to you.
Yeah, you don't have to be too kind. That's okay.
As kind as I can be, I guess, right?
Yeah.
So as we do with these, it's still in its infancy, obviously, but as I do with these interview portions of Horrible Writing, I really love bringing on writers who are willing to share more of the soft skills of the creative process.
Yeah.
We could go out there and, we could find a gazillion blogs and podcasts about the technical side of writing, and I do want to talk to you about that. Mm-hmm. But I also want to have a chat with you about that softer side. So you and I were throwing around some ideas about what we could do, and it wasn't easy. And I think that's really indicative of the creative process itself.
Yeah, it really was. Because at first, I listened to the other interviews you had done just so I could get a feel for what you're looking for what you called soft skills. So I know my first two ideas really were almost on the technical side, and you called me on that. And as we kept going back and forth, I remember thinking, well, Paul would make a great bartender or therapist. And then it hit me, writing as therapy, because that's my whole life is all about writing as therapy for myself. So yeah, I threw that out there, and it was like an aha moment. It's like, oh, we got the subject.
Oh, it definitely was. As soon as I read it, it was that light bulb moment. I pointed at my phone, and I was like, yes. Yeah. That's it right there. So talk to us about that. What does that even mean for you, that writing is therapy?
Well, it actually, if I'm being honest, it really goes back to when I was a kid. I make, no secret that I'm an introvert. I'm, very quiet, as you said, on social media. I'm not good at self-promotion and such. And when I was a child, I spent a lot of time reading. Loved comic books. That's what I did. Wake up in the morning, grab my comics, read comics. As soon as I was able to write, it was almost like an early form of fan fiction. I would put myself in the character, like say Spider-Man. I would write a Spider-Man story at 5-6 years old. Of course, it was very simple sentences and everything, but that was my way of kind of interacting with a world that I felt uncomfortable with. So a lot of those early stories were just my attempts at talking to people, even though it was all in my head, even though it was all imaginary. That was what I identified with, and Spider-Man in particular, because the whole, the story with Peter Parker and being a wallflower and awkward and all of that, I really identified with the character. So my early writing really started with trying to understand who I was, even though, of course, I didn't know that at the time. Hindsight's 2020.
Right.
Looking back, that's exactly what I was doing. I was learning how to talk to people in writing. As I got older, as a teenager, getting into music and everything, lyrics were powerful to me. I'd probably spend way too much time analyzing lyrics back then. I was always looking for the secrets in the lyrics. So then I would start writing my own and poetry, and that was another way to kind of work with what I was feeling and all the insecurities and the lack of confidence I had as a teenager went into my writing. And that's even today. All of the characters, every single character I write, there's something of me in that character. And that's why I find dialogue, for me, it's easy. I don't know how well it comes across to a listener, but for me, it's almost like I'm sitting down just taking dictation from my psyche. And that's where the characters' voices come from.
I like how you phrase that. So when you're writing this stuff, whether we're talking about maybe your earlier works or even a number of the things that you have coming up, and you're talking about, I think that really resonates with me, that you, at the early stages, your actual childhood, you created through identification, but now part of the process is, seeing the world in your place in it and leaving that little bit of yourself in each one of those characters.
Right.
Do you feel that it helps you process life, things going on in your life, whether it's, immediately intimate to you or even like the bigger, grander picture, some of your frustrations, joys, pain, etc.?
Yeah, it really does. I could probably cite quite a few examples in just my recent writing, but that's it exactly. So the best way to put this is, if I'm having trouble with something in my life, it could be a relationship problem, it could be something to do with work, pretty much anything. I tend to keep it inside in my normal everyday life. When I start to write, that's when it all comes out. It comes out in the characters' interactions. So it's almost a way, and again, almost isn't conscious. It's looking back at what I've done. It's almost a way of working through those problems. Between the characters, how the characters talk about it. I think it's really myself talking about some of those issues and some of those problems, and a lot of the characters are insecure about something. Something in the story makes them insecure, and I think that's a way for me to work things out, subconsciously, if that makes any sense.
I can relate to it, and I think I think a lot of writers will be able to as well. One of the things that I thought about while you were answering that, though, that is, I feel, one of the more curious, and I don't mean that to have any kind of negative connotations, but hearing what you just said about, dealing with these external things, or, obviously internal to you, life complications and processing possibly through the characters, is the demographics of your characters, at least the shows that I've heard so far, which is everything up to and including Inhale. You have all female protagonists. Do you think, is that a conscious decision, subconscious decision, in terms of how it relates back to what you just said about, processing life?
Yeah, that's a good one. Initially, my answer would be no, it wasn't conscious. When I wrote The Behemoth, Madison was a character I loved. I'd had the character of Madison in my head for a long time. Always wanted to do something with the character, and The Behemoth was the perfect vehicle for it. as I wrote other shows or other stories, it seemed to work that way, that it was usually a female protagonist. Then I realized that after maybe 4 or 5, it was painfully obvious that everything I was writing was coming from the point of view of a female protagonist. And I went back to a couple stories that I was struggling with. Scotch was a good example. The character of Bobby in Scotch was initially it was a male protagonist, but I was having trouble with the story, and I couldn't figure out why. You would think it would be easy for me to dive into that character, but it just wasn't working. When I flipped the gender to female, the character she was alive. It was there. So now that I'm aware of that, that's where I go to first. The character tends to always be a female to start with. I have a couple shows coming up, which there's 2 main characters, one being female, one being a male, but really the focus is usually on the female character.
Yeah, I've noticed that, and I, as someone who writes myself, I actually have more female protagonists than I do male myself. So yeah. I deliberately asked you that, I think out of selfish reasons too, because, I wanted to kind of, it's almost like a sanity check, right? I think I have a clue why I do it.
Why do you think
and I know you do it as well. Right, exactly.
So why do you think you do?
I think I think the reason I do it is because I can feel, this sounds so, it's probably a generational thing because of being a Gen Xer, so I'm not exactly a young puppy. But, for me, it's the way I feel the way I was raised to be a man, right? And you stay distant from anything that wasn't anger. And I have found that when my most tender, most vulnerable stories have always had female protagonists, and I didn't even realize it until I was actually preparing for this interview. And I was thinking about you and what you do, and I thought, well, damn, that's kind of something I do with my female leads is when I really, without a conscious decision, when I really want to touch on, those more vulnerable emotions and experiences, it's really weird for me.
Yeah, and as you're saying that, I think too, a lot of times in my life when I've had trouble or had troubles, I would talk to a female friend about it and work that out. I think going back to the characters and writing being this therapy, that's probably probably need to be on a therapist couch for this one. It's probably my way of engaging with a female listener to hear and work through whatever it is I may be going through, even if I'm not aware I'm going through that. It's probably where with the female character protagonists are usually there for me.
Yeah, and it makes sense if if your life experience. I mean, we're all shaped by what the path in life we've walked, and
right.
I've even professionally, all of my, with the exception of 2 guys, being prior military, I've had more supervisors than I could ever count because we move so often.
Yeah.
But out of those hundreds, there's only 2 guys that come right to mind as people that I would consider, somewhat as mentors, as good leaders, people who helped shape who I am now as an adult. But the rest are all female. And my career mentor, the person who really changed my life on a professional level, was a female who I still to this day check in with, once every 6-7 months, stuff like that. And I think that comes, subtly, obviously, from my background, what I identify, what I don't identify with, and try to get around that, that toxic mindset that guys can't talk about pain and despair and being sad,
Right, exactly.
Even at my age, I think I use them to work through it. So it's always interesting to me when I hear your characters, because again, your shows, in a good way, are all over the place. You don't stick to one genre. And what parts, let me ask it this way, what parts of Rick have we seen through the behemoth all the way to In Hell? Because I don't want to ask you to do anything spoilerish for any of the upcoming stuff. But your characters, I mean, even though they're all female, they span the spectrum.
Yeah. As far as what parts of me do you see in them, I think that's probably why a lot of the shows are so different. If I did Madison over and over again, I'd get bored with it. The listener would get bored with it. The reader would get bored with it. But what I tend to do is I'll start off with a situation that interests me. So first and foremost, I write for myself and not so much an audience. And hopefully it works. And so far it has. So I've been lucky in that respect. But I'll go with a story that interests me, and then I'll add my female protagonist to it. And as she works through that, it's how she's dealing with that is probably a good indication of how I would deal with it, if that makes any sense. So that's probably, to a roundabout way of answering your question, it's probably how you would see bits and pieces of me in each story is through the whatever situation the female protagonist in, like Madison or even Bobby or even Fiona Potts.
With this, serving as like therapy for you,
right?
Have you ever sat down and tried to figure out what drives it? And this is sort of a loaded question because you and I, like you said, like we shared at the beginning, we threw ideas back and forth as we were trying to determine what part of being a writer, the soft skill part of being a writer, could we share with other creatives when they listen.
Right.
And one of the things that you mentioned was, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, so please correct this as you need to.
Sure.
But the drive, the desire to be perfect, to deliver something perfect. So does this therapeutic aspect of writing, is it driven? Is the need to be perfect a catalyst? Is it more complex than that? Is that not even a fair question?
No, it's a fair question. The desire to be perfect usually hits me when I'm writing later on in the process. It's not how well, actually, I'll step back a bit. The blank page, are we allowed to swear on this?
Yes, we are.
Well, the blank page scares the shit out of me. Whenever whenever I'm starting a new project, it's that first page, that first line that I freeze up on. As soon as I get that first sentence out, it's almost like I'm carried away. I'm gone. I'm no longer there. It's the character, which that's wonderful when that happens. So, in a little bit is that desire for the perfect beginning. And I hate to go back and edit and tweak things. Of course, you have to, but I don't like to tweak my beginning, and I don't know why that is. That's just a thing with me. So I always stare at that blank page, and I want to start off perfect. But later on, as I've gone on, say I'm writing an episodic story. I could be 6-7 episodes in. It seems to be around that point in the story that I can tell if it's working. Even if it's not working a little bit, if there's something I feel uncomfortable about, my first thought is, well, I'll fix it in editing on the second draft. But 9 times out of 10, I'll trash it. I'll start over. And that's as to exactly why that is, I'm not sure I could answer that. That might require a whole nother episode. But yeah, that's when I get to that point, if I'm feeling that something doesn't work, and that's happened 2 different times in the past year where I've gone into 7 episodes of a project, I've started over instead of going back and fixing going back to look to see where things might have gone off track. Instead of doing that, I'll just start the whole thing over. And that's a little bit of wanting it to be perfect, but there's got to be something else there, and I haven't figured that out. But that's a good one. I'll have to think about that.
And that's interesting for me because I'm pretty much the complete inverse of that. When I look at that blank page, it's already been percolating in my head when I was taking a shower or just when I was waking up pouring the coffee. And that first line is always the first thing there. Yeah. And then after I get that done, I'm in the character's head. But once I start going, it's like a sunk cost fallacy for me. I am not going to trash that. I'm going to make that damn thing work if it's the death of me. So it's interesting. You were saying that you could trash something, and I'm sitting here squirming as I'm talking to you because I'm like, oh my God, I can't. That would hurt, physically hurt.
Right. Yeah. It's like Stephen King always says, go back and, kill your darlings. You've probably heard that.
Yeah.
And I have such a hard time going back and editing something and taking out pieces that don't work. And I guess I blow the whole thing up.
Well, and hey, that's the beautiful thing about being a creative is we all go about our own way doing it.
Yeah.
One of the things I always tell other people, especially when they're looking for advice, whether it's a Facebook group or a comment in a writer's group type of thing, is one of the things I hate to see, and I think you've seen it, Rick, in one of the groups that we belong to, but I hang out on writers groups as well in social media forums, and I can always tell when I'm not so patient with a post because it'll start out with something like, I was told I should ... And yeah, I try to preach the gospel of don't let other people should on your creative process because we all do it so differently.
Yeah, that's so true. And as much as, I hate admitting that I just toss everything out and start over, it's always the second time or the second attempt, it's so much better.
Yeah.
It's so far. That's happened with Izzy. I think I might have actually finished that, and it just didn't work. And that was,
oh my God.
So I started the whole thing from scratch. And the problem with that one was, and that was another thing, that was probably the only story that I've ever written or show that I've ever produced that going back to perfection, that I wanted that to be perfect. Not because I wanted it to be, it was initially Behemoth 2. It was supposed to be part 2 of the Behemoth. And the Behemoth had done so well, and I loved that show so much. I wanted to tell some more of the story.
Yeah.
So I didn't want to screw it up, and I didn't want it to be one of those sequels that just don't add up to the original. So I didn't want to fall into that trap. And I thought, well, I changed the protagonist. It wasn't Madison. I used another character named Izzy. So she was completely different, another complete take on the situation of having a world where the behemoth exists. So I wrote the story completely different. Instead of being a narrative, I did it more as an audio drama with a full cast. And it was forced. It didn't work as I was going through it. And I think, like I said, I finished it, realized that it's just not, it sounds as if I'm trying to do a sequel that's different. So I changed it to Izzy and turned it into more of an epilogue to the original story. And I worked in some narration because I work better with the narrative style anyway. So that was one example where going back, wanting it to be perfect, actually worked out. Not to say that the show's perfect, but I was very happy with it when it was done.
I don't think any of us who take this seriously could ever. I would be very hesitant to say that any of us who do this stuff seriously would ever say that the stuff we put out there is perfect.
Oh God, no. Yeah, absolutely not. All I do when I'm done, if I'm happy with it, if it touches me somehow. And some of the stories when I'm at the last page and I write that last sentence, if I feel a sense of loss and a tear in my eye, then I know I did it right, at least for me. And
no,
if it
I
works,
love that. You actually just gave me chills with that, and I'm not bullshitting you. You actually gave me chills with that because that's it. That's the feeling that I get when I'm happy with a story.
Yeah,
is that sense of longing because you've just lost something.
Yeah, that's when I have that feeling, I know it's okay. And I didn't have that for the first draft of the first attempt to write a sort of sequel to Behemoth. And the same thing with the Fiona Potts interview. It was completely different. It was a completely different show, and that didn't work. And I went back and I fell in love with that character as well. The show I'm writing well, actually not writing. I'm in the middle of production on a show right now, and that show is another one that I completely changed. So I go through that a lot. Luckily, I have the time to. It's not that I have all the time in the world, but I get up. You do the same thing. I get up extremely early in the morning. That's where I get all my writing done.
It's good to hear that I've got another member of the I call it the 458 Club.
Yeah. yeah. That's a perfect way to put it. So yeah,
I don't want to be alone in the 458 Club anymore. I'm trying to convince Raul Vega of Rose Drive to join me, but we're at different points in our life, and I don't think I'm ever going to get him to be a member of it.
Yeah, and I couldn't. I've tried to write in the evening; it just doesn't work for me. I usually end up trashing whatever it is because I need that blank mindset in the morning because I'll usually go to bed thinking about the story.
Dude, we are like brothers from another mother. That's scary.
So yeah, so I'll think about it, and in the morning I'm ready to go. So I fire up the laptop, I'll write for a good couple hours. It does suck after a couple weeks of doing that when I trash it and have to start over, but at least I have enough going on that I haven't lost a lot of time. If that, you know what I mean?
Oh yeah, no, it totally does. And, like Sarah shared in her interview, episode 16. For those of you who haven't heard it yet, go back to that episode, check it out. She spent 8 years on one story.
Yeah, that's right.
Never see the light of day. So, and I think it's part of the way that you process it, which is kind of surprising for me because, again, from a business standpoint, approaching the stuff like a business, I've tried to mimic a lot of what you do, which is, why I've got the 3 shows out there, a 4th one coming, but, working books on the side as well. I always have a story living in my head for so long that by the time it actually, it gets up to the top of the to-do list,
right?
It's a sprint for me. Like, for example, I'm, even though we haven't released season 2 of Subject Found, I'm already, like today, this morning, I finished the 5th episode of the 3rd season, so I'm halfway through writing the 3rd season.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah.
Yeah, nobody's going to even hear until 2019, but it's because they live there for so long. So for me, it's weird to hear that someone as prolific as you, will go through and sometimes do an entire series and then start from scratch again, because I don't know how you put out so much then. That's even more impressive to me.
Oh, well, thanks. I've thought at times to do a show that's in seasons. I just can't do it. I love that you can, and they're good. I would get myself, I could not. I'd get bored with the same story. At least you keep the seasons or the story gripping enough to keep people interested. And I'm assuming yourself too.
Exactly.
I couldn't. That's why I have so many different shows and why I do miniseries. There's too many thoughts, too many ideas, too many things I want to get out. I'll end up getting bored with it, and I'll end up boring whoever it is reading or listening to what I'm working on.
Well, and that's what, because now I can actually talk about it because the season started, but that's why we only ended up doing 4 seasons of Atheist Apocalypse. I wrote that 4th season, finished it over about a year and a half ago. And, in that time, never once in the subsequent 18 months did I go, gee, that was a lot of fun. I want to go write a 5th season. Not that I could, because as people will find out when they get to the series finale this spring, there's no way I can go back and revisit it. But, like you, I just, that's why I think I have them structured like that, with Atheist Apocalypse being the really only true serialized show, because Subject Found, it's a new monster every season.
That's
so that,
cool
it kind of keeps me, like you, because I would get bored out of my mind. Diary of a Madman, I only wrote the 1st season. A guy, White Noise.
I forgot that. Right.
He wrote season 2. There's a guy named Matt wrote season 3. Sarah Golding is writing a season of it. So it's like you, I couldn't do it, man. I could not. I'd get so bored.
That's too funny. It's funny. I love that about Subject Found too, with the new monster and such. I don't know if I don't know your age and such. I'm not asking, but there was a show back when I was younger called Kolchak Night Stalker. And every episode was a new monster, a new thing to go after, and I loved that show.
it lets you play around and explore. You know what I mean? So yeah, I'm with you. And that's well. Before we get to your shows, okay? Because I almost just asked you about the shows you've got going on. You have to. You've been wonderful. You've been great. You've shared a lot. But now it's time for you to share your horrible writing experience. So we have all the spirit of this question is share something that you're comfortable sharing. But what I try to do is I'll never know who everyone who trips across a show, and I see that a lot where we creatives, writers, are our own worst critics, and a lot of us fade away into life because we give up chasing this thing because there are serious, significant obstacles that present themselves that can throw us off track in our writing journey. So through other creatives sharing their horrible writing experience, what I'm hoping to do, Rick, is kind of help other people see, you've got a plethora of wonderful content out there, but in a couple seconds, people are going to hear that it isn't all sunshine and rainbows for you.
Right.
And so, I want to kind of encourage them through our own stories. So, Rick, if you don't mind, what's your horrible writing experience?
Okay. I've got a couple, but the one I'll tackle right now is early on, when I was trying to find a publisher, I was failing. I wasn't able to find a publisher for a couple manuscripts that I had. I was proud of them, just was not having any luck with it, couldn't find an agent, so I decided I would self-publish them. And this was going back 2002, 2003, early on when just as the self-publishing companies became online and made it easier to do so. So I self-published both books. So they're out there. I'm not going to tell you what pen name they're under, but I recently went back and flipped through one of those, and it's horrible. It's I can't. That's why I won't tell you what the books are, and I won't tell you what the name is on it. But there are 2 books out there on Amazon, and I can't get them down. I don't know how to get those books gone from the history books, but they're both there. They both are still available to purchase, and yeah, I can't stomach the fact that they're out there, and somehow, some way, somebody will attach my name to those 2 books, and they'll be like, yeah, this guy doesn't know what he's doing. so that's one. That's probably the biggest one, and it's my deepest, darkest secret that there's 2 books out there under a different name that I don't want anybody to know about. The other thing is more recent, and I'll try not to take up too much time on this. And it's not so much a horrible writing; it's something I wish I had done differently. And that's recent, is with the show Scotch. And I'm not saying that's a piece of horrible writing, but I wish I had made the character of Bobby stronger. Mm-hmm. I love the show. I love the character. But when I've re-listened to it or revisited the script, she's too passive in what's happening to her. And she's not as strong as, in my head, she was very strong. I think she comes across as a little too passive. And it's one show that you can't go back and completely change it at this point, but it's the one show I feel the worst about in the portrayal of my female protagonist. Because in my head she was strong, but I don't think it comes across that way in the story.
And that's interesting because that's actually your first creation that I came across. I did not know Behemoth when I found Scotch. I think I found Scotch because of the artwork that you selected. I was like, okay, this is cool. I think I knew your name a little bit out in the periphery, so I checked it out because of the artwork. And I really liked that story. But now you're going to make me go back and listen to it again.
Well, yeah, it's just, again, it's one of those things. I wish she was stronger. I think I pushed her through the plot. That's more of a technical side, so we won't get into plot-driven stories as opposed to not. But I think I forced a plot on her, and she didn't deal with it as strongly as I would have liked, and I think that comes across.
And that's really interesting. But I do appreciate it, and I know. How do you feel about your female protagonist iterations since her then? Because my Paul's personal opinion is you've had strong, I feel you've had strong female protagonists all the way through, but now understanding where you're at with Scotch, how do you feel about the ones that you've created, since that story?
It's worked out. Not that I'm trying to make them stronger. That's just the way I think they come through. But now I'm not as focused on a plot-driven story, and I think that's what did it. I think forcing her into a situation that I wanted her to be in pushed her into being more passive. I don't know I know I'm talking about her as if she's a real person, but to me she was when I was writing it.
Man, they are all real people.
Yeah, they really are. So now I tend to let the story flow more. I'll have an idea of where I want the story to go. I know how I want it to start. I kind of know some of the situations that I foresee happening as if I'm an all-knowing being looking down at the whole thing. I kind of know the direction the story will go and how it will probably end. Sometimes the ending surprises even me, but now I tend to write that way, and I let the character drive the story.
See, so listeners, there you go. He didn't stop after that. He didn't have any regrets and pull back from audio drama. He kept plugging. He learned. He lived. He brushed himself off, got up, and kept going.
Yeah, right.
But I think that's so critical for us to do, because we are going to put stuff out there and we're going to hear about it. Good, bad, and ugly. We're going to hear about it. So it's something I think that we develop over time. And if we can save each episode, if I can save one creative from not giving up art, it'll be, I can say that this show has, reached its objective. It really has. And I mean that seriously.
That's
because
great.
It's, not necessarily something that's easy to do, asking you guys to come on and then share, things that you feel you could have done better or things you really, just screwed up. And then ask, but I think it's very important for observers, for aspiring writers, aspiring audio dramatists to hear these kind of things.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
So let's talk about your shows for a couple minutes. So, you've got a slew of them, so I'll let you highlight what you want, but I'd really appreciate it if you kind of give folks an idea of what you've done, but also what you've got coming up, because like I said, listeners, Rick has got a slew of genres and generational genres, if you will. He, all the way from almost a very friendly kid-centric story to more mature content. So, Rick, what are your highlights and what do you have coming up for us?
Highlights. Okay, so there are 8 shows out now, and I might have that number wrong, but there's 8 shows out.
No, you're right. I just counted.
Okay, so Briar Lane is the one that's the most. That was my attempt to recreate, and I said this to Sarah Golding in an interview with her. It was my attempt to recreate the family atmosphere of sitting around the TV to watch Wonderful World of Disney on a Sunday night. That's what I was going for with Briar Lane. I love that show. I'm immensely proud of that one. So I usually point people to that show as a starting point for younger listeners, especially for younger audiences. But for what I'm working on now, I have 3 shows that are in various stages of production. Is There Anybody Out There, which will be coming out. I'm shooting for December 12th. I haven't committed to that date, but that's where I am looking at, or what I'm looking at. That one brings back Mackenzie Bryant, who starred as the voice of Bobby and not the Behemoth, in Scotch. So she is the lead in that, as across from Mark Coutu, who does a wonderful job. So it's really a 2-person show.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's coming out in December. After that, I'm in the middle of production of a show called Carbon Dreams. That's kind of a science fiction show. It's a full cast audio drama as well.
Okay.
No narration. That's a little different for me. The same with Is There Anybody Out There? There's no narration in that as well. So that one's in the middle of production. Look for that in the beginning of 2018, as soon as Is There Anybody Out There wraps up. And right now I am casting for a show called Pixie, which is a show about the Devil's Daughter. and that one is also geared towards a younger audience. Have a wonderful cast lined up for that. I heard, John Grill's show, Creepy.
Yes.
I heard on Nicole Goodnight on one of his episodes recently. Loved what she did, and she's going to be playing the part of Pixie.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah, so I'm excited about that. And I'm scripting another show right now that's called, and this is a kind of an exclusive. So the working
thank you.
So the working title is Shelter from the Storms. Not Shelter from the Storm to be confused with the Bob Dylan song, but Shelter from the Storms. They had to kind of get around the copyright piece there.
Right.
So I'm scripting that now. I just started writing that this week. I have a couple episodes under my belt. I managed to get past that blank page syndrome and started that yesterday.
Nice. Your output is just ridiculous. It really is.
Well, it keeps me busy, but I like I said at the beginning, it's my way of working through life.
Right. So are you ever going to go into, well, that you can publicly admit to, are you going to go back into longer form stuff at any point?
As you mean like in novels?
Yeah, like novels.
Yeah, I've actually tried.
Okay.
With Inhale, I thought I would take that because that's a story I think I can do a lot with. I can move that in a lot of different directions. So I thought with that I would start it as a novel. I would write a novel treatment of the story. But again, this is me. I get bored with things, so I got 6 chapters into that, and it's kind of collecting dust at the moment. As I work on the scripts, which that seems to be where my sweet spot is the short, episodic scripts, which are kind of like, and I've rebranded in a sense too. I don't know if you know about this, but I launched a new site called audiocomicbooks.com because that's how I view these stories are more like comic books, going back to my love of comics. So I view these all of the shows as basically being short comic runs. And so now if you go to audiocomicbooks.com, you'll see all of the shows sort of rebranded as comic book art, with comic book covers, and each show is like a separate issue of the comic. So I'm doing that now just to keep it interesting. It's really, again, more for me, so I don't get bored with things. I'm always trying something new, just to not get stagnant.
This is really, I'll make sure I link that as well. This is a gorgeous website. I was looking at it while you were talking about it. I had no idea you had done that. That's really clever. Again, something else for me to steal from you.
Yeah, so maybe we can, get that name out there. Audio Comics. That'll be the new brand.
There we go. And I love, and you always, do you use the same artist for all your stuff? Because you've got some gorgeous artwork.
No, I don't. But yeah, I've been really lucky with the artists. They're the one who did Jamia Knopf is she's from Germany. She did the Briar Lane. She did Fiona Potts, the face of Fiona Potts.
Okay.
She's also done Charlie's Mailbox. She's wonderful. But she's also pursuing her own career with her own projects. So I've had to look for other artists because of that, and I think you'll be happy with some of the other artwork that's coming up for some of the other people I've reached out to. Pixie, which you won't see on the audiocomicbooks.com site, but the artwork for Pixie is on modernaudiofiction.com, and that one is I found a great artist for that. She did an amazing job.
Yeah, I'm looking at that actually right now. I've had it up for a few minutes here, and it's gorgeous. But again, I like you're in touch, I feel, with what works with this stuff, to really take it to that next level. This is some really classy stuff. As were your answers to this. I really appreciate you coming on and opening up about this stuff that not everyone would do. So I really appreciate your time. I know you're not necessarily deep down into the social media stuff, but if someone were wanting to reach out to you and say hi, how could they find you?
Well, I am on Twitter at Rick Coste, and I do try to stay on there. That's you'll usually see me, if it's not every day, it's every other day. I'll put something out there. But I also have on Facebook, Rick Coste Productions. There's a page for that. You can reach me on Facebook. Email through the website. I love corresponding with people through email, so you can always get me via email. That's probably the best ways. I do have an Instagram account as well that I link to on the site, but I'm not as active on Instagram because I'm not a great picture taker. so
I feel ya.
Yeah. So when you see anything from me on Instagram, it's going to be cover art or something like that.
I totally feel you on that one, 100%. Well, Rick, I do want to thank you for your time and for sharing a lot of that personal insight into what makes you as a creative, and for sharing your horrible writing experiences. Listeners, I'm telling you right now, if you've got a young one in the house, or if you're all 20-somethings, 30-somethings and beyond, Rick's definitely going to have something that will pique your interest, that will interest you, and just obviously check out the show notes for which episode, because some stuff is not necessarily for younger audiences. But Rick, you offer everything to the world. I want to thank you for the stuff that you create and what you contribute back to just the community, because it just makes it, your stories make it richer, and I really appreciate you coming on.
Oh, thanks, Paul. Yeah, this has been a lot of fun. It really has. I appreciate this.
All right, everybody. Hey, thank you for your download and your listen. I hope you enjoyed that interview with Rick. Rick's an absolutely wonderful, caring, giving person, and obviously a talented creator. A couple of the reasons why I wanted to have him on so early in this exploration of interviews with other creatives, other writers. I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you took a lot out of it. And like I said, honestly, anyone that you have in the house, any age range, any interest in fiction, Rick probably has something for you, for that person that you love. And if he doesn't yet, he's going to. As you heard, he's just got so much coming down the pipe, and it's great. It's wonderful to watch him create what he creates. So I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you took something out of it. And like I said, hey, we all do this differently. And now Rick being the third interviewee in this series, you can kind of see that hold itself up, that we all do things so differently, and yet we keep plugging along. And that's really the lesson I want to take away. I want you to take away as we wrap up this episode 20. It's going to be the last episode of 2017. The show will come back on January 7th of 2018. But I need a couple weeks away to just kind of enjoy the people in my life that I have, return that balance back to my world, and I hope you do as well. Regardless of your perspective on the next couple weeks as we head in through the traditional holiday season and into the new year, I know we all come from different places in the world, different thoughts, different beliefs, and some of us have been through things that don't necessarily make this season very easy to get through. My thoughts are with all of you, each and every one of you, and if this is a tough time, please know that there are people out in the world who are sympathetic and are thinking of you, and I just wish my most well wishes to you, that you find peace in this season, that you reach out if you need something, if you need someone to talk to, and I'll be around. Shoot me an email. I swear, I'm not that bad of a guy. I don't think so anyways, but who does, right? Anyways, I truly hope, I mean that, and I hope that for all of you. Thank you for making this first calendar year of horrible writing a fun adventure. I'm enjoying it, and I'm enjoying the feedback that I am hearing from other writers, and I hope that this next year, coming up starting in 2018, I hope it's a year of revelations for all of us. I do. My goal for 2018 is to get one of these books published. I want to be a little more adventurous. I think I can get 3 published. Let's see. Hold me to that, okay? But like I said when this started, my plan to do this was to take you from a know-nothing writer to someone who is at least published, if nothing else. Right now, that will be my terms of success. Did I or did I not get published in 2018? We'll go from there. All right, so hey, I wish you all well. I'm going to go take a couple weeks off from podcasting, not from anything else, because I don't get vacation time in my job. And I will see you in 2018. Until that time, keep being epic. This has been Horrible Writing, and hopefully after this episode, you suck less than you did at the beginning. I am Paul Sading, your host extraordinaire. You can find me over on the Twitterverse at Writing Horrible and over at paulsading.com/horrible-writing. Until next time, suck less.